Okay, it's time for the third and final installment of Don't Give Me Butterflies, and you'll get a book rating after this book. I have written to the author to tell the author double thumbs up that this series has been one of the best series that I've ever read. I really hope that there'll be a number 4. I doubt there will be, but it's been a great series and I hate to see it go. Page 273. "Excuse me," the deep voice swept over her like a hurricane. Kat turned to find Jordan smiling down at her. Her heart did a sudden backflip. He was gloriously handsome in his tuxedo. His normally wind-blown hair was swept back, but there was a slight stubble on his jaw, which, paired with the silvery scar across his cheekbone, made him look just a little dangerous, like every fantasy she'd ever dreamed up, every dark hero she'd pined for in those books, every deep desire personified. She took a small step back as if that could distance her from the truth, but it was too late for pretending she didn't have any defenses left around this man because she loved him. She probably started falling the day Clementine had kittens in his room, and he lined up the box with his sweatshirt. Or it could have been the day that he begrudgingly, page 274, fed graham crackers to Waffles, or the day he witnessed her magical gift of communicating with animals and accepted it. He accepted her. Every time something funny happened at work, she couldn't wait to get home and tell him. Every hour they spent together over the past few weeks had been leading up to this realization. She was in love with Jordan Prescott. There it was. A trickle of apprehension slid down her spine, but she straightened her back, steeling herself against doubt. Maybe this time falling for someone didn't have to end badly. Maybe it would work out because he loved her too. If Opal was right all along and Jordan was happier here, maybe he would stay. Kat suddenly hoped with all her heart that he wouldn't go. She held on to that hope like a lifeline. "Do I know you?" he teased, taking her hand. She brushed aside her whirlwind thoughts and focused herself on to the moment. "I think I met you in a caravan once." Jordan's gaze darkened with desire, his whiskey gold eyes sweeping over her in open appreciation. He gave her a look so charged with heat, Kat had the sudden urge to climb him like a tree, wrap her legs around his waist, and kiss him and not stop kissing him until the gala was over and the band packed up and the country club concierge kicked him out. "La belle dame sans merci." He took her hand to kiss the tips of the fingers. "What's that?" Kat asked, distracted by the feel of his lips upon her skin, a poem about a very enchanting woman whose beauty captured a mortal man. "How very lyrical of you," Kat said, laying a hand lightly on his chest. "What did she do with that man after she captured him?" "Whisked him away to paradise for a while," Jordan said, "and then left him on a hillside to die." She burst out laughing. "Be careful, then. I could spell your doom." "I don't want to be careful. I want to throw you over my shoulder and steal you away right now." From the way he was looking at her, Kat believed he might just do that. Page 275. "Oh, but I haven't seen Opal yet," Kat said, "and I promised her I'd come. Have you seen her?" Jordan tilted his head in the direction of the ballroom. "She's dancing." He tucked Kat's hand on his arm and led her through the grand double doors. A sea of people dipped and swirled at a waltz in the center of the ballroom, where a huge glittery chandelier hung suspended from the coffined ceiling. Smaller chandeliers hung at verifying intervals throughout the rest of the room, casting a warm glow on the party, those below. Those who weren't even dancing sat at round tables covered in crisp white tablecloths, and in the center of each stood vases of flowers surrounded by twinkling fairy lights. "It's so beautiful," Kat said as Jordan led her to one of the tables. "I had no idea it would be such a big ordeal. My grandmother warned us it was going to be the event of the year." I meant it when I said she has bigger social life than anyone I know." The live orchestra began a new waltz, and Jordan held out his hand. "Dance with me." "Now this." She'd like to see Jordan Prescott of the beat-up truck and old-school rock music was leading her into a waltz? Inquiring minds needed to know. She placed her hand in his. They walked onto the colorful swirl of dancing couples. Then he swung her toward him, placed his free hand on her lower back. They stopped easily onto the waltz. Kat didn't know what surprised her more, the fact that he could dance, or the sudden skin-on-skin contact of a large warm hand on her neck and back. "Your dress is going to be the death of me," he said huskily. "Where did you learn to dance?" Kat managed. He was so difficult to concentrate on the steps when he was touching her like that. My mother, when I was 4th grade, the worst, she went to a ballroom dancing phase, swore that no man was complete unless he knew how to dance. Did you like it? She tried to imagine him as a little boy dancing with his mother. It wasn't easy. I was okay with it, his amber eyes lit with humor, but her ballroom phase eventually fizzled out, which is why this is the only dance I know. The older couple careened toward them, and Jordan pulled Kat against him, expertly spinning her into a little circle that avoided them. "Where did you learn to dance?" he asked. I used to date a dancer," Kat said. It seemed like a lifetime ago. She had barely been 20 and so starry-eyed back then. She tried so hard to be whatever he needed. And when it didn't work out, she was crushed. With Jordan, she didn't have to try it at all that hard. It was first time in her life that she could be just her true self. All that more reason to want it to last. Plus, she and Emma and Juliet now. There was something so liberating about knowing you had backup people who would be there for you, even if the world fell apart. He spun her in another circle, shielding her from the teetering couple who had been only too many cocktails. "Kat," Opal's sweetly warbly voice called. "Oh, my dear, just look at you." Opal and Sam Norton weren't moving fast across the dance floor. They were hardly moving at all, but Kat never seen Opal look happier. She was wearing a forest green evening dress with long glittery sleeves, and someone had given her a wrist corsage with white roses. When Sam glanced over at them, he stuttered, stepped, and then came to a complete stop. Opal looked questioningly at him. "Sam?" The old man blinked a few times, muttering under his breath. "Sam, you remember Kat Davenport?" Opal asked. He cleared his throat. I do. I didn't quite realize the resemblance until I saw you in that dress." "What resemblance?" Jordan asked. "You look exactly like Caroline Holloway," Sam exclaimed, his voice trembling with emotion. "The older Holloway sister. You're the spitting image of her, especially in that dress." Kat bit her bottom lip, hope swelling up inside her. "Did you know her?" "Not well," Sam admitted. "She was a bit older than me, but she was the talk of the town back in the day, right before she ran off to join the circus. A young, beautiful girl with roses in her cheeks and stars in her eyes, and always surrounded by animals." He chuckled at the old memory. "Right before she left town there was a fancy party, and she wore that dress. If I recall correctly, she had a white dove on her shoulder, and it caused, allergies, quite a commotion." "Emma and Juliet think she might have been my grandmother," Kat said. "I never knew my parents, but I've always had a connection to animals." "How do you know so much about the Holloways?" "I was a friend of the grandmother when I was a young man," Sam said. "Seems like another lifetime ago." He reached out to take Opal's hand. "Life never ceases to amaze me, does it?" That was page 276, 277. Here comes 278 and 279. Don't tear the page, Donna. "Okay, never," Opal said, smiling up at him. Kat glanced away because she didn't want to intrude what clearly was a tender moment between the older couple. She could tell just by the way he and Opal looked into each other's eyes that they were in love. At the end of the night, Opal introduced them all to her friends from the community center, and then turned them out to a group of lively older people who seemed to adopt Jordan and Kat instantly into the fold. They were already invited to bingo night and Sunday movies on the lawn and Sam Norton's fishing party. Jordan was asked if he played golf, if he could troubleshoot the assisted living home's computer network, and when he and Kat were getting married. Kat was asked if she wanted to attend water aerobics, if she could bring therapy animals to visit the home, and if she and Jordan had planned to have a lot of children. They both expertly dodged the uncomfortable questions, secretly grinning. That was by Facebook, sorry. Secretly grinning. Where is it at? At each other. A short while later, giggling from too much champagne, Kat escaped the ballroom with Jordan to walk in the garden. Since this was her fairy tale, hopefully they would find a secluded alcove to be naughty in. The air was warm, balmy, and rich scent of jasmine floated around them. The twinkling white lights woven through the trees and shrubs made everything feel and appear magical. Kat held Jordan's hand as they strolled. She felt as if they were in a dream. Everything about the moment felt perfect, and suddenly wanted to tell him that she loved him, that it would work between them, she decided. He just had too much to want it as much as she did. She stole a glance at him from beneath her lashes. Jordan's expression startled her. He looked so serious, and she felt a prickle of anxiety. She stopped walking. "What's wrong?" He pulled her to a secluded spot beside a fountain. "Nothing's wrong. I just want everything to be right." But his face was so solemn. Her anxiety began to escalate. "Everything is right," she said carefully. "Isn't it?" He took both hands. "You grew up differently than me, but I think we both had to become survivors in our own way." Now she was really worried. "Okay. We adapt easily, don't we?" Sure. Kat couldn't read his expression. What was he getting at? "I want us to be together," he said firmly, "and I don't want to lose you." Kat felt a tidal wave of relief. It was a choir of angels had sung those words. They couldn't have sounded better. She filled with so much warmth and happiness she might lit up the sky with fireworks. "I feel like the same way, Jordan. I want us to be together too." It finally felt good to say it out loud. Jordan looked like he wanted to say more, but a group of people walked up to the fountain. "Let's get out of here," he said suddenly. "Where do you want to go?" Kat said. He didn't even hesitate. "Home." Home, yes. She'd like to go anywhere with this man, but home sounded like the best place in the world. We're getting there. Okay, page 284, 285, and 286. "Here," Juliet said, excited, leading Kat to the overstuffed chair. "You'll want to sit down for this." "What did you find out?" Kat asked, looking back and forth between them. Both Emma and Juliet looked like kids on Christmas morning. Apparently, Eveline Bellamy moved from place to place after she left her parents, Juliet said. She was young and wild and full of wanderlust, determined to make it the West Coast where she could see Hollywood. She rarely kept in contact with her parents, which is the way of that particular Holloway gift. Those with wanderlust are always out there blowing in the wind. Now get ready for this. Juliet opened her mouth to continue, but it was Emma who blurted. Evangeline Bellamy was a theater actress for a little while in California, and she changed her name to Kate Davenport. "You are the daughter of Kate Davenport," Juliet said triumphantly. "That makes you our second cousin." Kat felt no surprise, only relief. Somehow she already begun to believe that it was good to finally get the proof. But how? Hunter's contact into missing persons had to dig deep, Emma said. But 26 years ago, an infant with no known relatives was taken into a police station in L.A. The same night, Kate Davenport, a single mother, left her apartment complex to go out with her friends. She left her infant daughter with a babysitter and never returned. Kat felt an odd, swishing sensation in her head, as if all those years of unanswered questions about her family were now funneling down through a narrow tunnel into this exact moment, a moment she had been waiting for her entire life. What happened to her? There were a multi-car pileup on the freeway that night. Emma's face was etched with sympathy. An overturned truck. Several people died, including your mother. Juliet reached out and laid a hand on Kat's shoulder. "They said she died," Kat whispered, "but I didn't know how." "The babysitter was only a teenager," Juliet continued, "so when your mom never returned, the babysitter and her parents took you to the police and told them everything they could, but they didn't know much about your mother, not even her real name, only that she was a waitress who lived in the same apartment complex. You went into foster care. We never knew you were out there. Even Evangeline's parents in Ireland didn't know about you. Hunter's contact said that he tracked down the babysitter and interviewed her. All she remembered was," page 286, "that your mother had a boyfriend in the military who had died. she said, and your mother was always talking about moving up north to the islands in the Pacific Northwest. I think she was planning on bringing you here, just like my mom did with me," Emma said softly. "I think the three of us were meant to grow up together, but your mother died before she could bring you onto the island." Kat felt an odd swell of sadness, mixed joy. She always wanted to know what happened to her mother, and who her family might have been, and now she knew. Emma and Juliet were beaming at her like she hung the moon. "So there you have it," Juliet said. "You're a Holloway, and you belong here." "But we already knew that," Emma said, rising from the couch. "The house never gets it wrong." The window curtains billowed out, and as if the house was agreeing. Kat let out a shaky laugh. Then they were hugging and talking and teasing one another in a comfortable way that family does. And in that moment, a large missing puzzle piece of Kat's life fell into place. With these women who had come to mean so much to her, she felt as though she could do anything, brave anything. She suddenly needed to see Jordan. She wanted to tell him about her past, tell about the relation to the Holloway family, most of all about her feelings for him. The memory of what he told her last night only amplified her feelings more. "I want us to be together. I don't want to lose you." Kat took a deep breath, filled her with determination. She loved Jordan Prescott, and it was time to let him know. Moving on. Okay. Page 290, 291, and further. "Kat," Jordan interrupted. His expression grew very serious. "Kat, I want to ask you something." She gripped the pink hula hoop, wondering if now would be a good time to tell him that she loved him. He seemed excited, actually, like he was about to say something really important. She had something to say, too. "Come to New York with me," he said with so much conviction it almost sounded like a demand. Kat blinked, swallowing the declaration of love and that had been on the tip of her tongue. "What?" She exhaled on a nervous laugh. "I can't go on a trip right now. For one thing, she didn't have the money, and another, she just found out she was a Holloway. There were things she wanted to do here with Emma and Juliet. She had to take care of the animals." Jordan walked over gently and took the hula hoop and tossed it aside. "I'm not talking about a trip, Kat. I told you last night I don't want to lose you. I want us to stay together. Come back to New York with me. I've been giving it a lot of thought, and I think you'll love it there." He reached for her hands, holding them tightly. "I'll do everything I can to make you happy." She kept her hands limp because she knew she was too confused to do anything else. "You want me to go live there?" "Yes," his expression was dead serious, "with me." Kat pulled her hands away with the pretense of pushing her hair back. Her heart thundered painfully in her chest. She tried to focus on what was happening. Leave Pine Cove Island. Never. Not when she had just discovered her real family. Not when she had people and animals relying on her. Didn't he know all this? "It'll be just you and me," he continued. "We won't have to deal with any of this." He gestured all around him as if it was a plus, as if there was everything he'd ever wanted, a life away from here. "You aren't." She cleared her throat, hating the sound of her voice sounding so small. "You aren't going to stay?" Jordan jerked his chin back. "Here?" He looked like he'd just discovered a litter of tigers on his bed. "No, that was never on my plan. Something big just came up at work, a job of offer of a lifetime, really, and I want you to come with me. Things would be so much easier there, and you wouldn't even have to work if you didn't want to. Say yes." He seemed so sincere and hopeful it hurt. The dawning realization that they both wanted such different things made her suddenly feel ill. A dull, painful ache stole over her, the steady pressure of tipping her off balance. She felt like a teetering of a razor's edge of some dark place that she'd been before. Disappointment, emptiness, loss. The place didn't really have a name, but she knew it well, only this time it felt much worse. He said he wanted her to ask something, and she knew, except he hadn't really asked her, had he? "Come back to New York with me. I want you to come with me. Say yes." None of them were questions, just demands. But then he'd never been very good at asking things. Maybe it was because he always wanted to be so sure he'd get what he wanted. Page 292, 293, 294, 295, and we'll go on. Kat took a deep breath and began building walls inside because that was how she kept from falling. She fought hard to appear unfazed. From a purely practical perspective, it wasn't an awful idea. She knew deep down that it wasn't the worst thing in the world to have the man you love ask you to fly across country and move in with him. The old Kat might have even jumped at the chance, but things were so different now. She hadn't only found love on Pine Cove Island, she found friends and family. She had a life here now, and she wanted to be in it with her life. But she wouldn't get to have that. A coldness settled over her. She wished she could be the woman he wanted her to be, but couldn't. She wouldn't. "How soon are you going?" she asked calmly. "Sooner than I initially anticipated, but I've got everything in order. The house is ready to sell, and I've already had some discussions with my grandmother." Opal, in her initial shock at this proposal, Kat hadn't even thought of the logistics. She took a step back, took a deep breath. "What about Opal?" "I'm going to move her into an assisted living facility." "A home." Kat's jaw dropped in disbelief. The walls grew around her stronger, because this wasn't just about her, it was about the people she loved. "You can't do that to her. This is her home. She's old and she's having trouble walking." His voice had a defensive edge to it. "This farm is no place for someone in her condition." "And you've just decided that for her," Kat threw back. All giddy happiness she felt earlier about the day was gone, and in its place was a cold, hard knot of resentment. "No, Jordan looked frustrated. I asked her what she wanted to do, and she chose it. She said that's where all of her friends lived, and she preferred to be closer to them." "Then that's just what she told you. It's because she doesn't want to be a burden." It sickened Kat to know that his grandmother was forced to be put on a brave face. Opal deserved better than that. "She said she would be happier there," Jordan insisted. "Why shouldn't I take her at her word?" "Because she's telling you what you want to hear, and it's easier for you just to accept because you know now you won't have to feel guilty about abandoning her." Angry heat roiled inside her, escalating until she could feel her face grow hot. All her life she moved from home to home, and she knew what it felt like when someone told you it was time to go. It was awful. It felt like failure. She hated that, and this was happening to Opal. "What about the animals?" Kat demanded. The idea of her precious animals having to find new homes made her heart crack. "Or were you planning to bring them all to New York City too? I'm sure Waffles and Lulabelle would love to share your bedroom with the cats and dogs and chickens." Her voice was sharp and filled with bitterness, but she didn't care. A muscle clenched his jaw, and he shook his head. "I can't bring them all, and you know that, but you could bring Hank. We could find good homes for the rest of them. I'll help you." He looked so sincere it made her angrier. "That's very noble of you," Kat scoffed, "but I'll pass on your offer to help." The fact that he was so easily willing to turn everyone out made her wounded heart feel like it was bleeding out. She wrapped her arms around herself and held on. His expression grew stormy. He was angry now, too. "Good. Look, I'm doing the best I can." "Are you? Stay here, then." She lifted her chin and challenged. "That would be the easiest for everyone. I thought you said you wanted us to stay together, that you didn't want me to lose me." Page 294. Jordan stared at her for a long time. His expression was granite hard, unreadable. Kat could count the seconds with every beat of her pounding heart. "My life is back there, Kat," he said finally in a low, steely voice. "Everything I've worked for, I'm asking you to be a part of it." A heavy ache settled inside her because she knew that wasn't possible. "If I go with you, then I'm no better off than when I first came here. All my life I moved around and I tried to fit into other people's lives, but now I know this is my place. This is where I belong. I thought you could see that. I thought you understood me. Kat, I've always been honest with you, and I care about you. That's why I'm asking you to come." "But what about them?" She pointed in the direction of the farmhouse. "What about Opal and the animals, and how could you so easily abandon them like they're not important?" "Damn it, Kat," he let out a harsh breath. "I can't always save everyone." He turned and stalked across the barn, running both his hands through his hair. He whirled around, gesturing the scattered remnants of junk. "My whole existence, my whole life on this damned island has been about cleaning up after my parents, taking care of everyone and everything as I best could. But I've got a new life now out there, one I made, one I worked hard for it, and I want to share it with you. Can't that be enough?" She moved toward the door. "Say it's enough," he insisted. Kat fought for a calm, and she didn't feel it. "How long before you go?" He started toward her. "Kat," she held up her hands. "How long?" He stepped a few feet away. "A week, maybe a little more. I'm having professional packers come up to help my grandmother move." "And the farm?" she asked quietly, gratefully. Her voice sounded even more neutral, the complete opposite of the cyclone that was tearing her apart inside. "Layla's sending someone out to survey the property. It goes on the market next week. So I have a week to find a new place." "No, I don't want you to find a new place. I want you to come with me." There was a bleak edge to his voice that hadn't been expected. Kat shook her head. "That's not going to happen." He flinched as if she slapped him. "Why not?" "Because unlike you, I believe in family and community, and that most things are I believe family and community are most important things in this world. I just found out that Emma and Juliet are my cousins. I have people here who need me. Then Smitty at the animal shelter, Opal, all the animals. I'm not going to pack up and leave just because you're offered me an easy life somewhere else. I know what's real and I know what's important. And you don't think that what I feel for you is real or important." His eyes gold and glittered with emotion. "Jordan, I love you," Kat said simply. It surprised her to say it so easily, especially under these circumstances. But since the entire house of cards had already been tumbling down around her, why not throw the final hand on the table? "I've loved you for a while, and I've been meaning to tell you that." Now he looked stunned. It hurt a little less, but knowing it came as much as a surprise to him, maybe he never felt as strongly as she did. "I want nothing more than for you to be happy," she continued. "Since you've been here, I believed you were happy. I hoped that you would change your mind about leaving, and I hoped that this place would be enough, that I could be enough to make you want to stay." "Kat." "No," she held up her hand. "Let me finish. You know what my life has been like in the past, and if you truly cared for me, then you wouldn't even ask me to abandon my family. You told me that we could make a family we wanted, remember? Well, I did, and my life is here now." They both stood there, with only a few feet of distance separating them, but it might as well have been 1,000 miles. An eternity seemed to pass, with neither of them moving or speaking. Kat couldn't think of a single way to make it work. She loved him, but he was leaving. He wanted her to go with him, but she couldn't leave her family behind. She wouldn't. Not when she finally found them. A crow's shrill cry broke the silence, and Edgar swooped into the barn, call of alarm, and that seemed to catch echo through Kat's bones. "Something's wrong." "What is it?" Edgar flew in another circle, crying out. "Something's happened," Kat said, running for the door. "It's Opal." Edgar flew out into the yard, and Kat ran toward the farmhouse. Jordan was right behind her. At the bottom of the porch steps, Opal lay in an awkward sprawl. Her purple velour track suit had gravel and dust down one side. "Opal!" Kat cried, running toward her. It was Jordan who reached her first. "Call 911, he said, leaning over his grandma. Kat fumbled for the phone and managed to dial the number. She gave the address to the operator, heart thumping in her chest like a war drum. If anything had happened to Opal, the old woman's skin looked like paper thin, and all the color drained from her face. His eyes fluttered, and Jordan reached out and gently laid his hand on her. "Grandma, can you hear me?" Opal's eyes snapped open. "Of course I can hear you. I got bad joints. I'm not deaf." This is page 296, 297. Jordan dipped his head and his shoulders shaking. At first Kat thought he was crying. It wasn't until he spoke again that he realized he wasn't. He was laughing with relief. "Grandma, I thought you were dead." And Opal gave him a crooked grin. "Not dead yet, my boy. I was just counting out to tell you both that I made a casserole and I slipped on the wet steps. Now help me get off the ground. This is so undignified." Edgar was perched on the porch railing. He called loudly. "I have to agree with Edgar," Kat said. "You should stay until the paramedics arrive." "That bird said all that to you with one call?" Opal asked grumpily. "Edgar is the one who alerted us," Jordan said. "He came and told Kat that you were hurt." "Did he now?" Opal's stern expression softened. "Remind me to give him some treats when I get back to the kitchen." She tried to rise, but Jordan placed his hand on her shoulder. "No, Grandma, you need to lie still." "On the ground?" she cried. "What kind of grandson makes his poor grandma lie out in the mud in the rain?" "A very terrible, no-good grandson," Jordan said, brushing her wispy hair off of her forehead. Kat watched the way he spoke with her and how he leaned over her to block the light rainfall. It made her heart ache to see how much he did care for his grandma, Deep down, Kat knew that he'd always been honest with her about his plans to go back to the East Coast. He never kept that from her. So she couldn't blame him, but it still hurt. If only he cared enough to stay. She pressed her lips together and refused to think about it. Opal needed her, and she wasn't going to break down now. Kat ran into the house and brought out an umbrella, propping it over their heads. The ambulance wailed down the street, and Opal lifted her finger. Those paramedic fellas better be good-looking, or else I did this stunt for nothing. They were here now, and Kat said the ambulance pulled into the driveway. She fought to keep her voice light. And I don't think you'll be disappointed, Opal. Everyone knows paramedic guys are good-looking. I think it's a prerequisite. For the next 15 minutes, the 3 paramedics surrounded Opal, asking her questions and assessing the damage. Eventually, they concluded it was a concussion, a possible fracture of the upper ankle, and after wrapping it in an inflatable air splint, they set her on her stretcher and carried her back into the ambulance. Kat followed, wringing her hands, wishing there was more she could do. Once Opal was secured, the young paramedic turned to them and said, "Whose family?" Jordan stepped forward. "Me. You coming?" The paramedic asked, holding the door. Jordan climbed into the ambulance and then turned to Kat. His face was solemn. "Thank you." The paramedic shut the door, and then it slammed, and it echoed through to Kat's bones. She slowly lowered the umbrella and watched them drive away. It was a while before she realized she was getting soaked to the skin and freezing. She made her way up to the apartment. Her heart was heavier than it had ever been. "Whose family?" the paramedic asked. Whose family? Not her. Not when it mattered. $2.99, $300, and $301. We're getting there, I promise. Okay, $2.99. Oh, I gotta readjust. Slowly, methodically, Kat dragged her old suitcase from under the bed and began gathering her things. She folded her shirts and jeans into flat, neat sacks and placed them in the suitcase, tops on one side, bottoms to the other. She was good at this, the moving on. She'd had lots of practice. There was a sharp, painful ache in the back of her throat, like she swallowed a pine cone, and it wouldn't go away. So she would just have to breathe around it. And she would not cry because that She would not cry because that didn't get you anywhere. It wasn't long before Kat's belongings were packed neatly into her suitcase. She was ready. At least she wasn't on the hook for the moving furniture. Silver linings. She sagged on to the old recliner and dialed Juliet's number. "You moving out?" her cousin asked in surprise. Kat knew that she should tell Juliet everything. And she would, but for now all she could manage was yeah. She took a shaky breath, focused on logistics. "You okay if I sleep over at your place for a couple days?" She just needed some time to think, away from Jordan, of course. She would go to the farmhouse every day to take care of the animals, but the idea of being so close to him right now was just too painful to contemplate. "I'd love to have you." Juliet's voice was filled with sympathy. "My cottage is mostly empty these days because I've been spending my time over at Logan's house. You can take the spare room. Stay as long as you like. My cat Luna hates everyone, but she'll love you." "What about Lucky and Hank?" "Lucky's happiest at the farm, but I want to bring him home with me in the evenings to sleep with us." Juliet laughed. "Do it. It'll be good for Luna to have some excitement in her life." Kat thanked her and said goodbye. Looking around at the apartment, and the butterfly cage was sitting empty by the window, she turned away with Hank trotting at her heels. In the farmhouse, Kat went to do a quick check on Clementine and the kittens, but they weren't in the downstairs bathroom. Walking through the house, Kat was beginning to panic, until Clementine greeted her from atop of the stairs. Kat followed her into Jordan's room, stunned to see the box of kittens on the floor near his desk. Bowls of food and water were lined against the wall. "Oh." Kat swallowed past the lump in her throat, bending down to pet the happy cat. Bittersweet images flashed through her mind. Jordan working at the desk with Clementine in his lap. Jordan pulling a string across the floor for her. Jordan holding the kittens. "You did it, Clementine. You won him over." Kat whispered, her eyes prickled with hot tears, but she blinked them back. No crying. She had to figure things out. She had to plan. There was no time for useless tears. It was a small comfort, at least, to know that he'd take good care of the cats until he left. She left the house and placed the keys under the mat. Then she assured the animals that she'd see them very soon. "I'll be back tomorrow before work to check on all of you, I promise, and soon we'll find ourselves a new place that allows cats, dogs, mini donkeys, and goats. Piece of cake." Kat started toward the door and with a sinking feeling. What are the odds that she could find a place like that? Maybe she could appeal to Smitty's good nature, which she knew was in there somewhere, and find a way to house them at the shelter until she could come up with a more permanent situation. And then she pulled out of the driveway. She realized just how much the farm had changed since she arrived. The farmhouse looked shiny and clean with its fresh coat of paint and flowers in the mended flower boxes. Hedges were trimmed and the grass was neatly mowed, and Jordan had even painted the paddock fence. He'd done so much to fix the place up. She allowed herself to hope. She allowed herself to believe that they could have a future together. A stab of grief tore through her, and she gripped that steering wheel, gritting her teeth, refusing to cry. She didn't have time to think about her own stupid heartache, not when there were animals depending on her. Hank sensed her sadness and climbed into her lap. "We're going to figure this out," she whispered brokenly. "I promise." A couple of days later, Jordan walked into the hospital room to find Opal surrounded by the doctor, 2 laughing nurses, and Opal spotted him at the door, beamed. "And here's my grandson now," she said. "I've been telling them about the time you decided you wanted to be a banker when you were a little boy. You remember that?" "Did you really set up a stand on the side of the road with words, 'Bank of Jordan'?" one of the nurses asked. "Yes," he said. "And would you believe not a single person wanted to invest their money. I think the safe I made out of a shoebox and duct tape didn't impress them." "He was a very enterprising child," Opal said proudly, "always looking to find ways to make money and get ahead." "Your grandmother can go home in the morning," the doctor said. "We'll sure miss her stories, though." The doctor filled Jordan in on Opal's aftercare. She suffered a fracture in the upper ankle, a bruised hip, and a concussion, but she was going to be just fine. When the staff left the room, Jordan sat beside Opal and took her hand. "Looks like I get to bust you out of here tomorrow." That was 302. Here comes 303. "And thank the good Lord, I've been bored to death lying around here, nothing interesting to do." "I happen to know that Sam Norton's been here to visit," Jordan said, "and you seem plenty interested in him." He passed Sam in the hall a couple of times, grateful that his grandma had such good friends. There were several flower bouquets in her hospital room, and most were from Sam. Opal blushed. "Sam is wonderful, isn't he? I'll be glad to move into that same complex so we can be closer to each other." "Grandma, are you sure you want to leave the farmhouse?" He watched her intently, trying to gauge her true feelings. "I would hate to think that you're telling me that just to make things easier on me." Kat's accusation had cut him to the bone, and for the past couple of days he couldn't stop thinking about things she said. They tore him up at night, and when he returned home from the hospital on Sunday and discovered her gone, a bleak emptiness had emptied up inside him. Every day it grew bigger. "Honest to God," Opal said, "I've been in that farmhouse far too long, and it's not set up for someone like me. That place needs a family with rowdy kids and parents who will enjoy the outdoorsy farm lifestyle. At my age, I'd be happier over in the assisted living community. That's where all the action is." Jordan glanced sideways at her. "What kind of action are we talking about here? Bingo, surely?" "Yes, of course," Opal said with a mischievous grin. "Bingo and knitting." He laughed and squeezed her hand. He loved his grandmother. For the first time since he made the decision to sell, he realized just how much he was going to miss her. "And now we need to have a serious talk," Opal said sternly, about arranging the blanket on her lap. "About you." "What about me?" The look on her face made him nervous. "Everything is going fine. Today I got a real estate agent and someone's coming over to assess the property, and I'll be heading out soon." Without Kat. The thought slammed into him like a wrecking ball. His grandmother's accident. Each time he went to go check the animals, they'd already been fed and cared for. He suspected Kat was coming in very early in the morning so she wouldn't have to see him. Every time he tried to call her, the phone went straight to voicemail. It hurt to know that she was avoiding him. A part of him tried to reason that maybe it was better this way, except it all felt so wrong. All of it. He had no idea what to do. "Kat came to see me yesterday," Opal said. Jordan's head snapped up. He fought for some composure. "And how did that go?" Opal's expression grew pensive. "She's very worried about her animals. She's going to try to keep them over at the shelter until she finds a place that will take all of them." Opal was watching him carefully, as if she was waiting for him to say something. Jordan didn't know what to say. He felt like an ass selling the farm and making Kat move out, but that's what his plan was all along. She knew that from the beginning. He even asked her not to bring any animals home, but did she listen? No. So what else could he do? "You're stubborn as a mule, my boy," Opal finally said. "That girl's in love with you, but you're too busy with your plans to realize that you're about to lose the most precious thing of all. If you let her go, then you're dumb as a box of rocks, too." Jordan remained silent. Opal scowled. I mean it. You'd be a fool to lose her over this. Even more foolish than your parents were. Okay, now we're going to move over to page 306. Jordan dropped his head in his hands. What was he going to do without Kat? She made everything right. She made everything in that farmhouse feel more like home than it ever had before. It was the kind of home you always wished for as a kid, the kind where you were welcome and people cared about people and they were happy to see you. Lucky nudged his hand with a cold, wet nose. The dog had been so scared since Kat first brought him to the home, but now he laid at his feet in Jordan's lap, and they'd known each other for years. Jordan's chest just felt tight. Edgar the crow swooped down and landed on the porch railing. Waffles brayed again and tossed the ridiculous tire into the air. Lulabelle jumped onto the wooden platform Kat placed in the paddock just for her. The little goat jumped on, then on. It was exhausting just watching her, but she was happy. They all were happy, and they trusted him. Jordan rubbed a hand over the sudden ache in his chest. A sleek white Mercedes-Benz pulled to a stop in the driveway. Layla emerged in a designer suit, mile-high stilettos, and dark sunglasses that made her look like a badass. Good for her. The little girl with a hand-me-down backpack had gone and done it. She made her life better, and he was glad for her. Hey, Layla said, this place looks great. It's amazing what a new coat of paint and some yard work will do to make a place look like a real home. It was a real home now. It never had been before, but Kat had turned it into one. She was the reason for all this. Kat was the reason for everything. Jordan suddenly felt as though the Earth's axis had tilted sideways and he was in danger of sliding off. He gripped the edge of the step, and it had always been Kat. From that moment he first saw her in that silly chicken costume at the farmer's market. He arrived back on Pine Cove Island believing he knew everything. But when he met Kat, all those things seemed to be so important before they slipped away until the only thing that was left was her. Layla, Jordan said, standing there, I've been an idiot. That was 306, 307. Moving forward, 2 more paper clips. Page 312, 313. Final paper clips, and then you get a rating. I love you, Jordan repeated. I've never said that before, but I'm saying it now. You're everything that's important to me, Kat, and I didn't realize that one thing that I've always wanted the most was not money or the lifestyle back in Manhattan. It's been you all along. I don't want to leave. I want to be here with you, and if you'll still have me. Kat felt as though a dam burst inside her, and all the emotions that she had been suppressing for days came rushing out. The tears were really falling now, spilling over her like a stupid crier who cries alone. Except she wasn't alone. She was with her motley crew of a family. For several moments she was overcome with emotion. She couldn't find any words. Hank let out a little bark of encouragement. Kat wiped her eyes, and the smile hovering on her lips as she stared at the man she loved. Say yes, honey, Smitty's gruff voice was called from the doorway. Then you can kiss and make up and get those mangy farm animals the hell out of my parking lot. Kat laughed through her tears. Okay. Jordan closed the distance between them and reached for her, burying his face in her neck. The animals surrounded them until they were anchored all on their sides with a muddle of fur and feathers and joyful noises. It was the oddest, messiest group hug Kat had ever experienced, but it couldn't have been more perfect, because these were her people. She loved them, and they loved her. And that was everything. There's a little bit, I think there's a little epilogue, but I did not read that epilogue to you. I want you to read it. It's getting a 20 tonight. 20. That's a must read. Although if you look at all these books in this series, from Don't Give Me Cupcake, or Don't Call Me Cupcake, sorry, to Don't Touch My Petunia, to Don't Give Me Butterflies, they've all been a 20 or better. And most of the time better, because I'm going to be sad to see that series go. But thank you for letting me share those books with you. That means the world to me, because they were so great books, and they help for a few minutes, if nothing else, give you a piece of so nice for them. Anyway, good night. God bless. I'm going to go enjoy myself until at the end of one of my movies. I'm going to put a movie in and watch it that's not going to be Christmas. So love y'all. Take care. God